Hello and welcome to our third Women's History Month Facebook Live. My name is Allison. I'm the program manager at Live Girl, and I'm here with Georgia Rosenberg, senior from St. Luke's. All of this month, Live Girl is teaming up with the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame to introduce notable women to Live Girls and everyone else who's watching. We are so thrilled today to have Ann Stanback, our notable woman for this week, here to join us live. Georgia, can you tell us a little bit about Ann?
Sure. Ann Stanback is a courageous activist for social justice for women and the lesbian and gay community. She is the founding president of Love Makes a Family. Ann, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So Ann, to start, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like for you growing up and how you came to found Love Makes a Family?
Yes. So I grew up in, as you can probably tell by my accent, in the South, in the town of Salisbury, North Carolina, with my mom and dad and two younger brothers. I was a Girl Scout. I was very active in my church youth group. I love nature and the outdoors, and my dad got us all interested in birds and bird watching at a young age. I love school, and I feel really fortunate that I went to school at a time in the South when things were really changing in terms of racial equality, and was really fortunate to have gone to the Salisbury public schools at a time when the schools were fully integrated. By the time I got to middle school, I was aware of racism when I was young, but looking back, I can see all the things that I did not see as a young person. But I think that sort of the struggles that were happening in the 60s and early 70s, I think those influenced me. My parents were very involved in the local community. I felt very encouraged by them to do whatever I wanted to do, and I realized even at the time that was, I was lucky, and in some way, I knew that I had been given a lot and that I had a responsibility to give back. So one of my favorite things to do as a young person was playing sports, and I think that it was sports and the fact that when I was in school, starting in middle school, girls weren't allowed to play sports. Title IX was just on the horizon. And so I found myself being a part of, pushing to make sure that there were, with our gym teachers and coaches, pushing to make sure that, girls did have teams to play on. And so I was on the first tennis team in my middle school and the first basketball and tennis team and softball team at my high school. And even when I got to college, Title IX, was in effect, but I saw that there was discrimination in sports. That was the most visible place for me, and that we had to really push to make sure that the women's teams in college got equal access to facilities and court time and equipment. So I really think of girls' sports as the place that where my activism was born, and I went on to college. I got involved. I helped start the Women's Center there, and in terms of my sexuality, it wasn't until I got out of college. I was sort of a late bloomer in that regard. I think partly because it was at a time when people didn't talk about gay stuff very, very much. So there weren't student groups. I didn't know really many other gay people. But it was after I graduated from college that I figured out that I was a lesbian, and came to Yale Divinity School that next year, and really began to explore activism, feminism more deeply, and began to get involved in lesbian and gay politics. Really, I would say in the mid 80s, when it was still a pretty uncool thing to be doing back in 1985.
But so important though, right?
Well, again, I think I felt like one of the first thing, once I figured out that I was a lesbian, and I had met my partner, now my wife, I knew that I wanted to be political, in the sense that the personal is political, and I needed to be able to be myself and be out. And again, I felt fortunate. I knew I could come out to my parents, and while it might not have been, the best news they ever heard, I knew that they would love me and support me, and eventually, they became very great supporters. And so I think that their influence and their being role models for the importance of speaking out for what you believe in was probably why I felt like I needed to speak out and get involved in lesbian gay politics back in the 80s.
So how did all of that lead to Love Makes a Family?
So Love Makes a Family was the organization here in Connecticut that worked to try to win the freedom to marry for same-sex couples. And there were, we had worked very hard in the 80s to try to pass a law so that gay and lesbian and bisexual people could not be discriminated against in employment and housing and public accommodations. And that bill passed in 1991. So before that, if you were gay, you could be kicked out of your apartment, you could be denied a job, you could be denied service in a restaurant. And that was, we created a strong grassroots movement to try to educate the public, educate legislators, and really sort of put a human face on, we're not scary people. We look, just like we are your neighbors. We look like your neighbors. We are your neighbors. We're your children. We're your parents. And we just tried to put that human face out there to the state of Connecticut. And it worked with our non-discrimination bill. And we, in the beginning of the 2000, we decided it was time. Other states were beginning to look at the issue of marriage equality. And we started our own organization. And by the time we won the freedom to marry in 2008, we were one of the largest grassroots organizations in the state. We had engaged not just the LGBTQ community, but the straight community as fierce allies in our cause. And I think that's one of the best lessons is we can't do any of these things alone. We need supportive partners. And the great thing is there were so many wonderful supportive allies who wanted to get involved and helped us win that fight.
That's incredibly inspiring, and it sounds like you gained a lot of your confidence at a very young age, and from your parents kind of growing up and telling you that you could do whatever you wanted to do. So I want to ask you, for kind of the younger members of our audience, what advice do you have for girls who have still not found or realized the power of their voice?
That's a great question. I think that what is important is finding something that you're passionate about. And we all have different interests and different things that are going to move us and inspire us. I think the other thing to remember is that we all do that work and have a voice in a different way. And for some people, that means being on the front lines of the protest. Engaging in civil disobedience, marching. And for other people, what that means is having the courage to have a one-on-one conversation with someone who has a different belief. And I think we all need to listen. That is one, when you listen, you understand where your opponent is coming from, and you understand what are the barriers to them understanding your story, so that you can more effectively help persuade them and move them, towards your own position. But I think girls can do anything, and I think Georgia, you're a perfect example of what our next generation of leaders is going to look like.
Thank you. That's very kind.
All right, so thank you, Anne. Now we're really excited to announce this week's winner of our creativity contest. The winner is Lila, 4th grade from Pierpont School. Woo! Congratulations, Lila. We love your painting. Anne loves your painting. Really great work. So you have a t-shirt and a $25 Amazon gift card headed your way. And so the final question that we have for you is actually from Lila. She wants to know, have you ever experienced discrimination? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Another great question. I have experienced discrimination. I've experienced discrimination as a woman, and I've experienced discrimination as a lesbian. And I think that I would say a couple things. I think that it's important that we have supportive people in our lives, and we're all going to hit rough spots. We're all going to face, most of us are going to face some kind of discrimination in some way. And it's important that you surround yourself with people who believe in you and who support you. And, they are going to be your cheerleaders to help you get through that time. And those may be friends your own age. It may be teachers or parents or, mentors. But I also think that for me, the way I overcame that, and maybe it was a way to avoid just sort of curling into a ball in the corner and wanting to feel sorry for myself, is I got involved and I got active, and I tried to figure out how do we make the world a better place, not just for one or two of us as individuals, but for everybody who is facing these kinds of issues, and for the next generation. So it always feels like it helps to see it as more than just myself. So that was probably the way that kept me going. What kept me going when I hit those barriers.
Oh, thank you, Anne. That was great. And I want to squeeze in one last question, actually, if you have a minute. Can you tell us a little bit what it was like when you found out that you were going to be an inductee in the Hall of Fame? That's a great question.
Yes, I got this letter in the mail back when we got letters, and I read it, and I just was in shock, and I was sure that this wasn't really meant for me, and I had to read it through several times. But I think that both of you know, and anybody watching this knows that an issue, a piece of legislation, a movement, it takes a village, and it is not about one person. And I was so honored to be inducted into the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame, but I also was a little, I felt a little shy about it too, because I know that I was really just one person amongst a sea of fierce activists who made marriage equality a reality in our state. And I am very aware of that, and I try to make sure that the opportunities that I've had in this work, that I can pass those along to the next generation in terms of mentoring and helping to train new activists on how we can do this work on whatever issues are coming down the road.
Thank you, Anne. It's really been such an honor to have you here with us, and thank you so much for taking the time. I don't think we ever could imagine that when we planned this with the hall that we'd have actually one of the inductees talking to us. So thank you so much. Georgia, do you have any last questions? Or
I was just going to say, I think you've definitely shown all of us exactly why that letter was mailed to you.
Yes.
So thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Well,
it's very inspiring.
Thank you, Georgia, and thank you, Allison. And Lila, congratulations. I absolutely loved your painting, and I hope I get to meet you someday.
And then before we end, Georgia, do you want to share who next week's notable woman is?
I'm thrilled to announce that next week's notable woman is Maria Sanchez, who is the first Hispanic woman to be elected to the Connecticut State Legislature. We can't wait to see what all of you come up with, and please see our website, golivegirl.org, for all of the details on the contest.
All right, well, thank you for joining us, Anne, and thank you for those watching. We hope you enjoyed it, and Anne, I hope we talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.